3. Hello, Namaskar. Welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA is all Finos Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. There's no question about it that India is pivoting towards a new world order. All the recent events in the past, world events, indicate the fact that India is fast moving towards a very new kind of a world order. A world order which is neither pro-Russian, a world order which is not anti-America or for that matter anti-West, but a world order which is pro-Indian. I will of course expand on this theme in this podcast. But two images stand out in my mind which reflect this new world order. The first image is of course that of Prime Minister Modi when recently he hugged President Putin at Kazan at the BRICS summit. It was a very symbolic image which conveys a lot of meanings. I will talk about that. But the other image, which is an image actually from today, is also very significant. It is an image where in a large conference room, Prime Minister Modi, along with all the top ministers in his cabinet, is sitting down for a meeting with German Chancellor Schulz, who also is there along with his top ministerial team, and they are having an important meeting to discuss the future of India-Germany relations. These images, what do these images tell you? These images tell you that India is not, as a lot of people feel, that it has now landed itself in the Russian camp or it has pivoted itself towards Russia after the Kazan summit, or that by patching up with China, it is trying to form an axis along with Russia and China. That reading to my mind is completely spurious. It is false. That is not a true reading, but rather the correct reading would be that India is engaging all the people it wants to engage with, and therefore it is standing for what it calls a strategic autonomy for a world order which is beneficial to India, which is pro-India. I'm going to of course expand on this theme and how India by a four-pronged strategy is going about doing this. But before I do that, as always, I would urge all of you to subscribe to my channel, the CAA Show. It's very simple really. All you need to do is to press that red button on your screen. Subscription is of course completely free. Would also really appreciate if you could press the like button for this particular podcast and share this video with your friends and with your colleagues. Okay, now let's get back to this very exciting topic on these new developments which are taking place across the Indian, both the external and the internal Indian landscape. Why do I say that India is neither pro-Russia, neither it is anti-West? That's the first point of the strategy. India is not even doing a delicate balancing act. It is doing none of these things. India is actually, what India really is doing is it's looking out for ourselves. But first we need to disabuse, I would say, ourselves of a popular perception which is gaining ground that India somehow is in the process of forming this axis along with Russia, of course, and maybe China also, to come to seek some kind of an accommodation with China, and therefore India, Russia, China form this axis which kind of kind of looks down upon the West and tells to the West that we three nations are a very powerful entity along with nations like Brazil, Iran and other countries, and therefore we can take on the West. That reading, as I'm repeating again, is completely erroneous. It is completely wrong. Now, why do I say that? India, of course, has an excellent relationship with Russia. There's no question about it. And the Kazan summit, the Kazan meeting with President Putin has, of course, strengthened relations. No question about that. And the breakthrough with China, that by itself, of course, calls for a totally different podcast, which I will do that maybe another time. That also is a step forward in mending fences with China. I am still not too sure if all the problems with China can be solved just by disengagement. This is really a lowering of tensions more than anything else. That is not to say that this axis is coming forward, what is really more important is that India is looking out for itself. And this visit of the German Chancellor is therefore becomes very, very significant. Now, notice something very interesting in the ministerial team which is accompanying the German Chancellor. All the top ministers of the German ministry are there, but one of the most interesting persons who has accompanied Chancellor Scholz is Annalena Baerbock. That is the foreign minister of Germany. She belongs to the Green Party. Now, this is a very interesting person. Why interesting vis-a-vis India? She has in the past criticized India for being soft on Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine. Some would even say she has been a bit of a, not a very strident, but a bit of a trenchant critic of India. But the same Annalena today was seen not only in the ministerial team, but she was exchanging pleasantries. She was exchanging agreements with Indian ministers, Rajnath Singh, with Jaishankar, of course. The same Annalena is very much there. And this is particular meeting, the German meeting with the Indians, and this cooperation, and especially this announcement that 90,000 skilled Indian workers. And who are skilled Indian workers? They would of course be IT professionals, they would be engineers, doctors, they would be nursing staff, they would be caregivers. They would all be going to Germany. Germany in fact has tripled the number of people who would be allowed now in Germany. And why has that been done? And that's a question to be asked, because Germany, and along with the rest of the world, is waking up to the fact, especially after the events of the last, I would say, 1 or 2 years, after all the protests regarding Palestine and all the other movements which are going on in Europe and America, countries like Germany, which are facing labor shortage now, understand that India is the country to go to, is a go-to country for to get the best skilled workers to their country to meet the labor and to meet the skilled manpower shortage, because Indian workers are still the best in the world. They don't protest, they don't make a noise, they keep their head down, they work hard, they save the money, send back to their families. That's a kind of ethics which not only Germany but any other country in the world would like. Germany has now understood that. Sometime back, if you remember, Israel had signed a similar agreement with India where they wanted a lot of, I think that those are not so many skilled workers, but there were a lot of manual workers which they wanted from India. More and more countries are making a beeline for Indian labor force, for Indian skilled workers to come to their countries, because Indian workers by and large are non-political. They don't protest, they don't make a noise, they keep their heads down, they stick to the rules, they are law-abiding, and they contribute to the economy. That is the kind of labor force or the workforce which any country would want. It's a dream workforce. So what I'm really saying is that the first point of the strategy is that just by Prime Minister Modi hugging President Putin in Kazan doesn't mean that we are now in the Russian camp. See, these kind of arguments are old world arguments. You know, at the time of the non-aligned movement, I'm talking of the 70s, when either you were the Russian camp or you were with the American camp, and even the so-called non-aligned movement at that time was really pro-Soviet Union at that point in time. Nothing of that sort any longer. We have taken a very, what I would call a principled stand on the Ukraine war, which now a lot of people are understanding that it probably is the correct stand. We are not jumping into anybody's camp, but we are looking out for our own interests, as these agreements, as these relationships with European countries tell us. And the second point being that there was this narrative going on that because of this Pannu affair, because of these Khalistani extremists, that India now is becoming, is turning its back to the West. It is now looking more and more towards Russia and China. That is not really the case. The fact is, India has been engaging with Europe. If you remember, there were visits of the Prime Minister to Poland. There were visits of the Prime Minister to the Czech Republic, which are Central Europe. Then, sometime back, Doval, the NSA, he went to France to talk about defense deals, defense matters. The German Chancellor is here now. What does it mean? And then even Britain. UK, which we know in the past has been very ambiguous on a lot of matters regarding Khalistan and other matters with India. The same UK, Keith Starmer's government is very, very keen to have an FTA with India. So India and Europe also, they are engaging with India. That is relationship is actually is on an upswing if you think about it. I'll talk of the American relationship also a little later in the program, but the first point of the strategy is that India is engaging with the world. It is not only engaging with Russia or a little bit with China now, as people think. That particular thing of India forming the taxes, or a lot of podcasters are saying, is complete rubbish. It is nonsensical. It is not true at all. That's the first point. The second point is that India is also now on the lookout to create a new world order, a new system. And what does that mean? It literally means that now we are looking that the important world bodies, for instance, the United Nations, then you have the multilateral, the multinational financial bodies like the World Bank, the IMF, these become more representative with more Indian representation. But the most important being, of course, the UN Security Council, where we want a seat now on the UN Security Council, given our size, given our contribution to the world economy as a fifth largest economy. So India is looking now to reshape the world. And a lot of the world is waking up to the fact that, yes, India now really needs to be on the Security Council. India should actually be a part of the G7 or create the G8. It is part of the G20. All these things now India is looking, and that is called reshaping the world order. So that is again a thrust of Indian policy, and therefore this engagement with all sides, engagement to the West, and even with America, which we have a bit of a nettlesome, I would say, relationship with the United States right now. But that again is a manageable thing, a manageable relationship which can be managed. Nothing is really going out of control, though there are lots of irritants on both sides, absolutely. With Europe, as I've told you, we are engaging with Central Europe. We are engaging with the powerhouses of Europe, that is Germany, with France, even with Britain. There's even some kind of an engagement, I think, with Spain also in terms of transport, planes, and other, defense equipment. There's very good engagement with Italy also, again for defense matters. So there's a lot of engagement going on with Europe, and therefore anybody who stands up and says, oh, that India's now pivoted towards Russia is talking out of they're talking out of their hat. And then India also, in the same light, is also looking to maybe, we haven't still given our full views on it, but I have a feeling that they would not be so averse now to accepting that the one outcome of the BRICS summit would be that probably they would establish a secretariat in the BRICS summit to make it a more permanent, interesting, as an entity which comes into its own. But more important than that, India might just lend its support to another reserve currency which BRICS comes up with, which means that dollar being the reserve currency. But now we have all seen the problems associated with the dollar, that sometimes the dollar can be used, not sometimes, I would say now it is being frequently used to sometimes stop countries in their tracks. We have seen what the Western world has done vis-a-vis Russia and Iran. Nobody wants to be in that similar situation, and therefore, if a reserve currency comes up, or even more than one reserve currency comes up, I have a feeling India would not resist it. India would be okay with the idea, which again is larger part of reshaping the world order. All that process is going on even as we speak. And number three, we are not only content with that. Anybody who thinks that India is a softball or India is a soft case and can be pushed over, or we can be, a lot of people, for instance, lose their patience when all these irritants come out from the West, especially from America, Canada and all that, advising India reacting so strongly. What India has learned over the years, especially I think under the stewardship of the Prime Minister and especially our Foreign Minister Jaishankar, is to push back intelligently. You pick your fights. Now, what do I mean by that? I want to explain this particular thing. let's first understand that India is not unlike in the past. If you remember in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we've had these major flare ups with the United States. If you remember with the issue of the, I think her name was Kobargade, I'm exactly not remembering the full name now. But that the Indian diplomat issue where a lot of people were expelled from both sides, both from India and the US, and relations really nosedive. But I don't think so India is going for those options now, even though the irritation of Pannu is a very, very strong matter which people just don't like in India. But despite that, we are engaging with America. Why are we doing that? Because of two factors, and we need to understand that. India, of course, understands that despite all the closeness we have with Russia, and the foreign minister, in fact, mentioned some time back that we have never had a problem with Russia, but despite all that, the fact is, the single biggest differentiator between Russia and America is that we still, we can't communicate with the Russian people because we don't know Russian. It's as simple as this. Whereas we communicate in English. We share a common language with America. Then cultural ties, people-to-people ties with America. These are the two biggest factors. But despite that, there are two important other things we need to engage with America is because even today, despite all the advancement and the progress of China, the fact of the matter is that America even today is the technology leader of the world. It is also the most important military superpower in the world. So for that reason alone, we have to engage with America. But how are we engaging with America? We are not, as we say, we are picking our fights. We understand there are issues. The Pannu issue is a very, very serious issue, which I think we feel very, very deeply about, very aggrieved about. The Americans also probably don't particularly understand the sensitivities of India regarding Pannu. Maybe there is a deliberate attempt by some people in the State Department to prop up Pannu. Some people even say it could be a CIA asset. All those things are there. But the fact is, we are in a very interesting way pushing back when we need to push back. But at the same time, we are also cooperating with the United States on a number of fronts. But what we are really doing is we have picked up a fight by, going after Canada. And why have we done that? Because two things are going on regarding the Canada issue. The first is Canada is being used as a Trojan horse by the West, I think, to test India, that how far India can go. If Canada is willing to play that game, if Trudeau is willing to play the game, fine, he does it, whatever. That's the first part of it. But what India is also doing is that it has shown its will, it has shown its intent, that it is pushing back very hard against Canada by the expulsions of all those diplomats, by not mincing any words when it comes to the support of Canada to all the extremist elements, the criminal gangs which flourish in Canada, by the support to the so-called Khalistani cause. But more than that, what India has actually done vis-a-vis Canada and especially Trudeau is this, that India actually has pushed back against the liberalism, the liberal woke order of the world, and in the process it has, I would say, even decimated that order to a large extent. It is therefore in the process of ushering in a new order. The no holds bar now attack. See the way our High Commissioner who has come back from Canada, and now that's of course on government prodding, he's giving all these interviews to these television channels, and he's laying out the full case how these people were, they were pushing the Khalistani cause. Now India is pushing back really, really hard, and it is not only against Canada and Trudeau, but it is a pushback against the woke liberal order, not only in Canada, but I think in the Western world. So India is picking its fights. It is choosing to push back intelligently. That is what India is really doing. So it's a very, very interesting, it's a very, very sophisticated diplomatic outreach. India plays both hardball and softball at the same time. Some people would say there's a lot of softball vis-a-vis America, but yes, you need to do that because we have to stay engaged with America, no question about it. Disregard the Ambassador Ghassetti's statements in Delhi and all that. He's known to shoot his mouth. That's not so important, or even some officials of the State Department. The larger relationship with the Americans is very, very important. So we are choosing our sides. We are choosing to push back, but we are choosing to push back intelligently. That's the second strategy of India. The third very important, the fourth important, very important thing is that we are also now India is using the nationalistic media in India to push back hard against its enemies. Some of the deep hurt, some of the deep anger which is there in India against Canada, the role it has played, for instance, in the Kanishka bombing, or in the recent Khalistani protests, the targeting of Indian diplomats, the Niger issue, the Pannu issue. Maybe the government at time is now pushing back, but the government still has to draw a line somewhere in terms of how much it can say, or how much, how much hardcore it can go on these matters. It leads to the nationalist media to express the full, or vent out its full fury and anger, and therefore maybe I have a feeling nationalist media is doing the job of the government by pushing these views, and that's why Canada has taken umbrage to the pronouncement of our media, and that is because now the government is learning to play a smart game, that the media, which the West also does, by the way, they use the media to push forward their case. We are doing the same via the nationalistic media, via the news channels, and via the social media platforms. And therefore, this is an interesting 3 or 4 point strategy of the government, where now we are engaging with all sides to create a new world order which is beneficial to us. Notice something very interesting. At the Kazan summit, the UN Secretary General was there, Antonio was there, and he had a look of befuddlement on his face. And Prime Minister Modi was speaking where he actually criticized the United Nations, that it is like almost like a defunct body. It stands for nothing really at the present time. India is making its case very, very clear that you need to change all this, and therefore the way to do that is not to join some camp or join some country, but to engage all sides, both the Western world and the non-Western world, to pick your friends, but more important, to understand and know your enemy, and then intelligently push back against the enemy, and keep your powder dry, which means keep your armies ready. And that's the only reason why this breakthrough is coming with China. So that's the Indian strategy. And now let me very quickly give you a couple of pointers about the individual relationships with the countries in this new pro-India world order which India is pushing for. Let's take the China case. Now, what's really happened with China? As I said, there would be a totally different podcast on this, but just in 2 or 3 lines, if we have to sum up what is really happening vis-a-vis China, then here's the thing. The breakthrough on the patrolling agreement might not necessarily mean that the Chinese tanks would start withdrawing from Deksang in a day. We will have to wait and see what the military commanders ultimately tell us and decide on that. But certainly, the patrolling space which had been denied to India earlier has now been given. The Chinese probably would be withdrawing. If they are already, I believe they have started withdrawing. So that is going to happen in these areas. And why is India now agreed to all this, or why has India actually pushed put China in a particular, not in a corner, but I would say, but it's almost like it has prevailed over China to see sense and realize the folly of its earlier actions, is because it is best to ease tensions with China. As I said, keep your powder dry. I don't think so the armies are going to withdraw from both sides. I really have my doubts. But certainly, there would be some kind of an understanding that, some kind of a status quo ante, as it is called, has to be restored. Because at the end of the day, now it's very clear, not only to China, but to the entire world, that you can ignore India, to your own peril in an economic sense, and China wants to be engaged with India. But we have also moved on. In the last 4.5 years, we went through pain, but now we are fast emerging as a supply chain hub for the rest of the world. We are emerging as a manufacturing entity in our own right. I don't think India is going to give that up and cede that space and again go back to importing Chinese goods, lock, stock and barrel into India. I don't think that's going to happen, but still you would need China for a more balanced trade with China, and that's why these breakthroughs are coming with China. So we need to watch this space. As I said, we need to be careful, but at the same time, we need to lessen tensions with China. That's the first part. Now, let's talk a little bit of the US. Now, what's really happening with the US is, see, right now, it's a wait and watch game. We all know that there will be a new dispensation which will take power. Now, whether it is Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, we will wait and see. But that doesn't really matter because matters of policy are more or less the same. They can't be radically different. We have to keep pushing back against this Khalistan problem, which of course a lot of people feel the US uses as some kind of a leverage to put pressure on maybe on India. Let's wait and see what happens to that particular space. But as I said, it is important to keep engaging with the United States. I don't agree with so many podcasters and channels who keep on, strumming along that US is the number one enemy. Certainly not. That is rubbish. There is no way we can ignore the US as we cannot ignore Russia also. We need to understand these priorities. They are very important priorities. So the way we will push back against Canada and the way we push back against the United States are two different strategies altogether. They will be completely different strategies. That's the new India, the new Bharat, which will keep doing that. So with the US, engagement is going to be there. At the same time, we will put forward our point of view. And as far as this case of this Vikas Yadav person is concerned, the fact of the matter is there is another theory which is floating around that perhaps this case, a domestic case against which he was arrested by Delhi police, probably is a case which was actually manufactured here only, so that there could be some kind of a suspended sentence, which means for years and years this case would drag on, which means he could never be sent to the United States in terms of extradition. Because again, extradition has to work on reciprocal basis. We still don't have Headley. He hasn't been given back to us, and all the other Khalistani elements was there in the US. So that's kind of, and when Garcetti says that we need more than assurances about this, the fact is we also in India need assurances that you will not play the Khalistan card with us. So that dynamic is going on between India and the United States. We have to watch the space, but let's not, what the government is also telling us in a very subtle ways, let's not despair, let's not get angry, let's not, start building up this narrative that, USA is completely ill-disposed towards India, they want us to fight a war with China. I personally don't agree with these narratives completely. Every country has its own strategic interest. And obviously they would like us to be completely in their camp. That's very, very natural. It doesn't suit us completely also. That is also natural for us. So it's a very interesting relationship with the United States. We have to watch out that space. Then overall in the West, as I said before, this entire narrative that now we have turned our back to the West and we are forming this China, Russia, India axis is complete rubbish, bullshit, I would even say. This is all hogwash. We are actually very deeply at the moment engaging with Europe for all kinds of cooperation, for economic cooperation, for defense cooperation, and the point, I don't know why it escapes people, is that our skilled workforce, even our labor force, gets opportunities in Europe. That to me is a very, very significant development, and India is pushing for that, and it's yielding results now. The countries are finally waking up after all these protests and all the internal strife and the migration problems in their countries. They're waking up to the fact that the Indian workforce, whether it is skilled or it is non-skilled, is easily the best in the world. They are non-controversial, they stick to their work, they don't play divisive politics, religious matters are kept, within check, in the sense that we are a very religious people, but we don't impose our religious views on other people. So who wouldn't want a workforce like that in their country? I think that is the most significant development which we are doing vis-a-vis Europe. So that's the engagement with Europe. Now with Russia, and finally with Russia, all relationship is excellent, and now tomorrow, assuming even if something unforeseen happens, sanctions are imposed or whatever happens, but the fact is now we are developing this trade route stretching from Chennai to Vladivostok, which is the oil. I think oil is, of course, the number one export of India right now, which keeps coming from Russia, and we kind of reprocess the oil and supply it to the rest of the world, especially Europe. So that route is being developed. A lot of trade and commerce is also being developed with Russia. But at the same time, there is something very interesting which has happened in Kazan, which again has escaped a lot of people. Of course, there were these hugs, there were these pronouncements of Indo-Russian relationship, friendship, which we know is true. But there were two significant statements which the Prime Minister said, which have to be understood in the right light. The first he said was, this is not an era of war. And the second statement was, in some context, he said that we have to respect territorial integrity of countries, which to my mind, to my reading, is a kind of a mild criticism of Russia. So it's not as if everything what we say vis-a-vis India and Russia, everything is, we agree with everything they say. We have subtle, I would say, not deep, but subtle different points of view from Russia. We are not afraid to express that, as we are not afraid to express our point of view to the United States. This is the true meaning of strategic autonomy. This is the new India which I'm talking about, the new world order, which is right there staring in the face of the world, and you can only ignore it to your peril. But this is the reality, the new reality of India. And therefore, on this note, I come to the end of this particular podcast. I hope you liked this particular show. You like it, of course, you can subscribe to it by clicking on the red button. And of course, till next time, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.